In 1940, a bizarre and little-known alien encounter would happen at Abiti Lake, which is located in northeastern Ontario and western Quebec, Canada. Around 2:30 p.m. on January 8th, two lumberjacks named Hormidas and Demaze were in the midst of a tough workday when they would decide to take a much-needed break. As such, they cut off some tree branches and sat down in the snow, planning on resting for a short while and then finishing up their workday. As the two men sat, rested, and talked, they would soon spot an enormous white wolf walking around. The wolf didn't seem interested in the two, but appeared confused. Then, as if it were commanded to do so, the wolf walked around 100 feet to the men and sat down in the snow. It was surely a strange scene, but things were about to get much more bizarre. Right behind the fir trees, 6 humanoids appeared, stunning the two witnesses. The beings were very small, all appearing exactly the same and wearing dark green puffy suits and being around 2.5 feet tall. They had small slanted eyes, ears that were shaped like an upside down triangle, small chins and flat heads. The two witnesses would state they all looked identical, as if they had all rolled off the assembly line. While the wolf was quite docile at this point, things were about to change. The wolf then spotted the 6 beings and immediately stood up, becoming angry. The hair on its back stood, and the wolf growled, showing its teeth. At this point, the beings looked over in the direction of the lumberjacks, but strangely seemed to look past them, as if they didn't see them. Next, they looked at the wolf and pointed their fingers at it, speaking among each other. Their language was bizarre, something the men had never heard. It was very fast, and Demaze would later state it sounded similar to Algonquin. The group continued talking, and soon one of the beings would begin to approach the wolf. Interestingly, the men noted that none of the humanoids wore snowshoes, but were able to walk right on the snow, not sinking. The being walked right up to the wolf, raised its hand, and began speaking to it. Things would not go as planned for the little alien, though. The wolf aggressively reacted by jumping at the being and ripping it apart. After this, Demaze broke off a branch and threw it at the wolf, screaming, and eventually the wolf ran off. The 5 other beings then walked up to the corpse of the dead alien and began to pick up what was left. According to the witnesses, the sight was quite grotesque, and Hormidas even threw up. The beings then grabbed the corpse of the alien and quickly fled into the woods. Hormidas and Demaze chased the beings, following their footsteps, but couldn't catch them as they walked too fast. They eventually came to a spot where the footsteps ended. In the snow, the two men could see a circular pattern, indicating a UFO probably landed, and the beings were picked up. The men then headed back to the spot where the alien was attacked and would find a piece of the being's suit and also brown blood. Quebec ufologist Donald Sir would investigate the accident years after it occurred. It appears, though, he didn't speak with the men directly, but family members who did confirm the story did happen. What can we make of this incredible close encounter of the third kind? Probably the most incredible part of this story is the wolf attacking the alien. It seems pretty unrealistic that ETs, with all their technology, couldn't protect themselves from a wolf. Still, it's very possible that these beings in the story were not biological in nature and were actually robots. As such, we can speculate that, similar to how humans use drones to collect information, perhaps whatever was in the UFO sent these humanoids down to gather information and wasn't concerned about their well-being. It's not known what happened to the two men in this story, but by all accounts, since the family didn't disclose anything else, they probably moved on with their lives. Perhaps the most famous UFO abduction story involves a couple driving on a dark, desolate highway. In 1961, the story of Betty and Barney Hill shocked the nation as the couple recalled the strange events that took place that night. While the Hills' story is still popular today, the environmental characteristics reported in their story we see far too often. individuals often spot UFOs in remote areas and often at night. In this story, we will cover a witness who had a close encounter of the third kind in New York in 1958. Furthermore, this story is particularly intriguing because of what the witness saw, something truly bizarre. In January 1958, a woman serving in the U.S. Army took leave and decided to drive to see her son, who was then 18 years old. The woman was driving on the New York Thruway Highway. Today, the New York State Thruway is a 570-mile toll road system that runs across New York State, connecting major cities, rural areas, and tourist destinations. Back in 1958, though, the Thruway wasn't as popular as today, and that night, weather conditions would make things even more difficult. There was a heavy snowstorm occurring, and having limited visibility, the witness was having trouble seeing down the highway. Then around 1:30 a.m. local time, up ahead the woman would make out a large shape in the center of the road. The witness couldn't make out exactly what it was and thought initially it was an airplane wreck. As she kept approaching though, her car motor started to die down and soon the witness's car lost power. She tried several times to restart the car but had no luck. The woman was now without power and sitting in the darkness. To make things more frightening, up ahead, she spotted something strange. The object ahead was a slim rod or pole that was illuminated around 50 feet high. Even more strange, it kept getting shorter as if it were sinking into the ground. At this time, the stunned witness was going to hop out to get a better look, but then something unbelievable happened. Two entities began rising next to the shrinking pole. The entities didn't look humanoid, but appeared like animals with 4 legs, a tail, and 2 front feelers under their head, similar to arms. The beings appeared to be moving around the poles, although it's not clear what they were doing. Then suddenly the entities would disappear, and the rod would begin to rise up. The witness could now see that there was a saucer-shaped UFO. It rose up around 10 feet off the ground, and then quickly flew away in the night sky. Once it flew away, the witness was able to restart her car again. Before she drove away though, she walked over to the spot where the pole had went. The pole had gone in the median, and she could see the grass as the snow had melted. The rod had not dug a hole in the ground though. That night the witness decided to pull over and stay at a local motel. The next day as she returned to her son's house, she told her son and other family members about the event. They were stunned and persuaded her not to report it. For some time, she didn't. Eventually, though, she did. The witness later relayed the story to ufologists Jacques Vallée and Otto Binder, as well as Fortean Times magazine. Vallée particularly noted how convinced she was something had happened to her. What can we make of this bizarre alien encounter? There are several things that appear to stand out. First, the beings weren't humanoids. There's been many reports of alien encounters, but almost always the beings are humanoid in appearance. Usually gray or Nordic aliens are reported, but even other reports of bizarre creatures most of the time appear humanoid. These beings had 4 legs though. Still, it's reasonable to assume that beings or aliens with 4 legs do exist and are out there. It could also be the case, of course, these strange entities were some type of drone-like device collecting information or samples. The second thing that stands out in this case is the pole that went down to the ground. It seems like, based on the details, the ship might have been able to transform its shape. That, or possibly the witness was so fixated on the UFO she didn't actually spot it. Regardless, the event was surely atypical, as usually people report a beam of light shot down. In the story, it seems the pole was used as the teleportation or transportation device. All this said, this was surely a fascinating story, and one very unique. In 1977, a bizarre alien encounter would happen in the city of West Pittsburgh, California. The case is considered to be highly credible, as it was investigated by multiple ufologists and noted to be one of the best in the year 1977. Before diving into the case, it's important to point out, too, the boys' unbelievable story came out before the popular movie Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is significant because once the movie was released, there was a spike in alleged UFO sightings around the country. In time, this case has come to be known as the 1977 West Pittsburgh alien encounter. On May 20th, 1977, 3 boys, all ages 14, named Lenny Young, George Ferreira, and Patrick Morrison were hanging out, walking around the Santa Fe Railroad tracks around the marsh of Suisun Bay. Up to this point, the night had been uneventful for the 3, and as such, they decided to start heading over to a spot known as the Pump House. The Pump House was a castle-like structure complete with a moat and a bridge, which pumped the fresh water out of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta for the treated water division of the Contra Costa County Water District. In addition to this, it was a popular spot for young locals to hang out. The trio considered hitchhiking to the pump house, but instead opted to walk, cutting across a big field. This decision would be something that would change their lives forever. As the boys began walking, they suddenly spotted something up in the sky. The boys noticed first the lights. It had red lights going around it, and in between these red lights, there were blue lights that were flickering intermittently. The object appeared to be silver and had a classic UFO shape, being disc-shaped. At the time, the craft was around 100 feet away, when it would soon slowly descend to the ground. As the UFO touched down, the craft went dark, and in the darkness across the field, the boys saw 3 creatures coming toward them. As mentioned, the area was dimly lit, only getting light from 2 distant streetlights. The boys would describe the beings to be stiff-like robots surrounded by smoke and around 5 feet tall. Lenny Young would later recall, "They were like smoke, they were black, they had no faces. I don't know if they had arms or heads. It was like they had no clothes on. They were walking towards us. They were around 5 feet, 6 inches to 6 feet tall." Patrick Morrison said, "They were weird looking, walking slow. They looked like they were wearing long skirts over their heads. They were black. They walked as if they were linked together, like figures in a chain gang." In fact, the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois, would add that the case is one of the most 3 credible encounters before the 1977 hit film, Steven Spielberg's Close Encounter of the Third Kind. Richard Haynes, a psychologist, noted he was impressed by the very similar detail in the different stories told by the 3 14-year-old boys. He did add in his report, though, that there was no other eyewitnesses that saw the event. That said, what can we make of this story? In general, there are 3 primary theories about what happened that night. The first is that the boys were victims of an elaborate hoax. Most believe, based on the interviews, that the boys' intentions were good and they weren't lying, but some suggest they might have been tricked. While it's possible the individuals they spotted were just humans or in a costume, it doesn't really explain the lights in the sky or the UFO they saw. The second theory is that the boys spotted something extraterrestrial that night. This is the most popular theory and is supported by the consistent stories told by the boys. As mentioned, there were no other witnesses, but in a pretty remote area late at night, it's understandable that no one else saw it. The third theory was that the UFO and the beings were interdimensional in nature. This is one of the less popular theories, but some suggest that interdimensional beings are visiting us. Like all too often with these cases, the witnesses face trauma that can last for years. George Ferreira's mother reported he had nightmares about the event for years. It's quite understandable when you think about what might have happened if the boys had felt brave and approached the entities. Would they have been taken? It surely seems possible. In sum, the West Pittsburgh case is surely an interesting one, and one that appears quite credible.